When the event planner called about your family's ancestral home, I realized I'd never been the owner of my own house to them. I was just the caretaker of their future party venue. It happened on a scorching Charleston afternoon. I was carefully dusting my collection of leather-bound pharmaceutical texts when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, is this Alma Caldwell?" A woman's voice, bright and professional. "Yes, speaking." I set down my feather duster, adjusting my reading glasses. "Wonderful. This is Melanie Winston with Platinum Celebrations. I'm calling to confirm the logistics for the Caldwell family gathering at your historical home next month. We're just finalizing the vendor arrangements and—" I nearly dropped the phone. "What family gathering?" "For Jessica's engagement, of course. Your granddaughter. We're looking at approximately 200 guests, and the tent company needs to know where exactly on the property they can secure—" "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice suddenly ice cold. "No one has discussed using my home for any event." A pause. "Oh, I was told by Mrs. Caldwell, your daughter-in-law, Sarah, that everything was arranged. She gave me quite the tour yesterday." Sarah had been in my house, showing around strangers, planning a party for 200 people? "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I said carefully. "This house is not available for events. You'll need to find another venue." I ended the call and stared at my bookshelves. This house, my house, was a 3-story Charleston single I'd rescued from near collapse 15 years ago. I'd spent every penny of my husband's life insurance and countless hours restoring it, researching historically accurate techniques, hunting down period-appropriate fixtures. I was 68 years old, and this house was my retirement dream, my sanctuary. My phone rang again. David, my older son. Of course. "Mama, why are you giving poor Melanie such a hard time? She's just trying to do her job." "David," I managed to keep my voice steady, "why is an event planner calling me about a party at my house that I never agreed to host?" "Don't be difficult, Mama," he said, his voice smooth like his father's had been, but lacking the warmth. "Jessica has her heart set on those engagement photos with some authentic Charleston history behind her. Your house is perfect, all those pretty columns and that big staircase. It'll look just like something out of a magazine." "This isn't a movie set, David. This is my home. It's just one evening, Mama. Family helps family. That's what we do." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "We need to talk about this in person, not over the phone." "Wonderful," he said, as if I'd just agreed. "Sarah will have Melanie call you back tomorrow with the details." He hung up before I could object. I looked around my sitting room. Carefully preserved family photographs, the antique secretary desk where I kept my records of the house's restoration. The original crown moldings I'd had restored by a craftsman who specialized in historic homes. None of this meant anything to them. They just saw a pretty backdrop for Jessica's photos. A quaint old house owned by a quaint old woman they barely bothered to visit except when they wanted something. I tried calling David back, but he didn't answer. Instead, I got a text from Sarah. "Don't overthink this, Alma. We're family." Family. The word hit me like a blow. Family was supposed to respect boundaries. Family was supposed to understand what matters to you. I poured myself a small glass of sherry and sat on my back porch. The ancient live oak in my garden spread its massive limbs overhead, Spanish moss swaying in the evening breeze. My phone dinged with another message. "Michael. Hey, Mama, Jessica is super excited. Her florist needs to know if they can hang these light garland things from your tree. Also, we need to move some of your old furniture out for the dance floor. No big deal, right?" I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. No big deal. That tree was over 200 years old. The weight of heavy decorations could damage its branches, and my old furniture wasn't just antiques. They were pieces I'd lovingly restored, each with its own history. My phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. "Alma," she said without preamble, "David says you're being difficult about Jessica's engagement party. Sarah, nobody asked me if they could use my house. You all just decided. It's a family celebration, Alma. Family property, family event. This isn't family property. I bought this house. I restored it. I pay the taxes and insurance on it. With Henry's insurance money, she reminded me curtly, that he left to me specifically because he knew how much this house meant to me. And what's more meaningful than your granddaughter's happiness, than being part of this family? I didn't answer. What could I say? That I felt like an outsider in my own family, that they had never valued my passion for preservation or my career? Sarah sighed heavily. David has already promised Jessica. The Parkers are very influential people, Alma. This connection could be good for all of us. After she hung up, I walked through my house. Every room, every wall, every floorboard had been touched by my hands. I'd researched the original colors, tracked down period wallpaper patterns, sourced antique fixtures from salvage yards across 3 states. 15 years of my life was in these walls, and my family wanted to cram 200 people inside them, with catering equipment, dance floors, and God knows what else. My phone buzzed with a text, this time from Jessica, my granddaughter, whom I rarely saw except on holidays. "Grandma, so excited to use your gorgeous house. Quick question, can we take down those old curtains in the front parlor? I'm thinking white chiffon would photograph so much better." Those old curtains were reproductions of the original 1890s damask that had taken me months to research and special order from a historic textile company. Another text came in, this one from Michael with an attachment, "Floor plan for the event. The rental company needs this approved ASAP." I opened it to find my home completely rearranged, my furniture pushed aside or removed entirely, rental tables everywhere, a bar set up in my reading room, a dance floor covering the hand-restored parquet in the main hall. It hit me then. This wasn't just about a party. This was about them claiming ownership over something I had built. They didn't see me as the owner of this house. They saw me as its caretaker, maintaining it until they needed it. My hands shook as I set down my phone. Years of swallowing my hurt, of trying to fit into my family's expectations, suddenly crystallized into cold, clear purpose. I picked up the old leather ledger where I kept track of my rare book collection, a passion no one in my family had ever bothered to ask about. Then I called Mr. Abernathy, my late husband's attorney, and one of the few people who truly understood what this house meant to me. "Mr. Abernathy, it's Alma Caldwell. I think it's time we discuss that matter we talked about last year." His voice was warm and understanding. "Are you certain, Alma? Once we set this in motion—" "I'm certain," I said, feeling stronger than I had in years. "They've left me no choice." Part 3. The next morning, I was in Mr. Abernathy's office before 9. His secretary showed me in with a warm smile and a cup of coffee. Cream, no sugar, just how I liked it. "Alma," Mr. Abernathy stood, his tall frame slightly stooped now with age. He'd been Henry's friend for over 40 years. I pulled the papers we discussed. I sat across from his desk, my back straight despite the arthritis that sometimes flared in my spine. "I want to move quickly, Jim, before they try to stop me." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The Historical Society has expressed interest several times. They've always admired your restoration work." "And they'll maintain the conservation easement?" "Absolutely. Once filed, the house will be protected from any significant alterations for perpetuity, regardless of who owns it." I took a deep breath. "What about price?" Mr. Abernathy smiled. "Given the immaculate restoration and the historical significance, we're looking at $1.8 million, Alma. Cash offer." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. $1.8 million. After living on my $1,800 monthly pension from Red Pill Pharmaceuticals for years, pinching pennies, letting my children think I was barely getting by. "The buyer is eager," Mr. Abernathy continued. "They can close in 2 weeks if you're ready." 2 weeks, before Jessica's engagement party, before my family could take over my home, treat it like a backdrop, devalue 15 years of my life's work. "I'm ready," I said. On my way home, I called my friend Eleanor. We'd worked, together at Red Pill for 20 years before retirement. They did what? She exclaimed after I explained the situation. Without even asking you? David's got his father's attitude, I sighed. What's mine is theirs by right. And Sarah's just as bad. Remember how she acted at Henry's funeral? Like she was the grieving widow instead of you. I did remember. Sarah wearing black Chanel, directing the caterers, acting like the lady of the house while I sat in shock, trying to process that my husband of 34 years was gone. What are you going to do, Alma? Something drastic, I admitted, but right. For once, I'm doing what's right for me. About time, Eleanor said firmly. Those kids have taken you for granted for years. When I got home, there was a florist's van parked outside. A young woman was measuring my front porch. Excuse me, I said, climbing the steps carefully. What are you doing? She smiled brightly. Oh, Mrs. Caldwell, I'm with Blooms and Bows. Sarah Caldwell hired us for the engagement party. I'm just measuring for the floral archway we'll be installing. There's been a misunderstanding, I said calmly. There won't be any event at this house. Please contact Sarah for alternative arrangements. The woman's smile faltered, but she said, I'm sorry, but this is my home, and I haven't authorized any events. I went inside and locked the door, my heart pounding. My phone immediately lit up with texts. Sarah, the florist just called. What are you doing, Alma? Michael, Mama, please don't make this difficult. David, we need to talk. I'm coming over. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Mr. Abernathy again. They're pushing harder than I expected, I told him. How quickly can we make this happen? I'll call the buyer right now, he promised. And Alma, stay strong. I hung up and walked through my home once more, running my fingers along the banister I'd stripped and refinished myself, looking at the walls I'd painted in historically accurate colors. This house had been my salvation after Henry died, my purpose when I felt lost. Each restored inch represented hours of research, of labor, of love. I wasn't just letting go of a house. I was protecting it from people who didn't understand its value. My doorbell rang an hour later. David stood there tall and imposing in his expensive suit. Mama, he said, stepping past me without waiting to be invited in. What's going on? Sarah says you canceled the florist. I didn't cancel anything, David. I simply informed her that no event was taking place here. He sighed dramatically. Mama, we've been over this. The party is happening. Jessica has her heart set on it. All her friends are expecting it. The invitations have gone out. Without my permission. You're being selfish, he said, his voice hardening. This is about family, about Jessica's future. The Parkers are connected to everyone who matters in Atlanta. This isn't about the Parkers, I said, quietly. This is about respect. My house isn't a venue you can book without asking. Your house? He laughed, a sound without humor. Mama, let's be real. You're living on a small pension in $1 million home you can barely afford to maintain. We're just trying to help you make use of it. His words stung because they revealed how little he knew me. He had no idea I'd managed my money carefully all these years, that I'd invested wisely under Mr. Abernathy's guidance, that I had resources they knew nothing about. David, I said carefully, I think it's time for you to leave. This conversation isn't over, Mama. Yes, it is. After he left, I sat in my parlor as the afternoon light filtered through the windows. The house was quiet, as it had been for years since I'd lived alone. I picked up a framed photograph of Henry and me on the day we bought this house, both of us beaming, standing in front of the dilapidated structure, full of dreams for its restoration. They never understood, did they? I whispered to his image. What we saw in this place. My phone rang again. Mr. Abernathy. It's done, Alma, he said. The buyer has agreed to an expedited closing. We sign papers next Tuesday. 1 week. In 1 week, I would no longer own this house, but neither would my children ever control it. Thank you, Jim, I said, my voice steady despite the tears welling in my eyes. Are you sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything in years. The next morning, I received a text from Sarah. Family dinner tonight at Charleston Club. 7 p.m. Dress nice. We need to discuss the event as a family. I knew what this meant. They would try to pressure me in public, where I couldn't make a scene. David and Sarah were masters at this tactic, creating situations where saying no would make me look unreasonable. I texted back simply, "I'll be there." I spent the day preparing. I called Eleanor again. "They've invited me to dinner," I told her, "to discuss the situation." "Ambush is more like it," Eleanor snorted. "What are you going to wear?" "Does it matter?" "Alma Caldwell, of course it matters. You show up looking like the sophisticated, independent woman you are. Remind them who raised them." I smiled, grateful for her friendship. "I still have that St. John knit suit Henry bought me for our 30th anniversary." "Perfect. And wear those pearls he gave you, the real ones." "Eleanor, you're terrible." "I'm right, and you know it." After we hung up, I opened my closet and pulled out the navy St. John's suit. It still fit perfectly. I fastened Henry's pearls around my neck, applied a touch of lipstick, and drove myself to the Charleston Club. The maitre d' led me to a private dining room where my family was already seated. David and Sarah sat side by side, Michael next to them. Jessica was there too, looking like a fashion plate in designer clothes, her diamond engagement ring catching the light whenever she moved her hand. "Mama." David stood and kissed my cheek. "You look nice." "Thank you, David." I took the empty seat across from them, facing my children and their partners like I was at a business negotiation, which in many ways I was. "We've ordered champagne," Sarah said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, "to celebrate Jessica's engagement." The waiter poured, and David raised his glass, to Jessica and Christopher, and to family traditions. I sipped my champagne silently. Family traditions. As if they cared about those beyond what served their purposes. "Grandma." Jessica leaned forward, her voice sweet as honey. "I can't tell you how excited I am to have my engagement party at your beautiful house. All my friends from Spelman are just dying to see it." "Jessica," I began, but Sarah cut me off. "We've hired the best caterer in Charleston," she said, "and the florist has the most gorgeous vision for the garden. We're thinking of stringing lights through that magnificent oak tree." "That tree is over 2 centuries old," I said. "It can't handle the weight of heavy lighting." "Oh, they do this all the time," Sarah waved dismissively. "It'll be fine." "Actually," David jumped in, "we've been thinking this might be a good time to discuss the future, Mama." "The future?" I set down my glass. "Your future," he clarified. "And the house's." Michael, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We're worried about you, Mama. That big old house, all those stairs, it's a lot for someone your age to manage." I felt a chill run through me. So this was their real agenda. "I manage just fine," I said calmly. "But for how long?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "We've been talking to the most wonderful retirement community, Magnolia Pines. They have beautiful apartments, activities, people your own age." "And what would happen to my house while I'm living at Magnolia Pines?" I asked, already knowing the answer. David cleared his throat. "Well, it wouldn't make sense for it to sit empty. We thought perhaps we could manage it for you. Maybe even as an event venue. It could generate income to help with your care." There it was. They wanted my house. Had probably been planning this for months, using Jessica's engagement as the first step. "I see," I said quietly. "And who would make decisions about this venue?" "We would, of course," Sarah said, as if it were obvious. "David has excellent business sense, and I have connections throughout Charleston society." "What about the historical integrity of the house?" I asked. "The period details I've spent 15 years restoring?" "Well, some updates might be necessary for modern events," David admitted, "but nothing drastic." My phone buzzed in my purse. I normally wouldn't check it during dinner, but something told me to look. It was a text from Mr. Abernathy. Buyer has agreed to all terms, including conservation easement. Ready when you are." A strange calm washed over me. I had made the right decision. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," I said, looking each of them in the eye. "What won't be possible, Mama?" Michael asked. "Any of this. The party, the retirement home, your plans for my house." Sarah laughed nervously. "Alma, don't be dramatic. We're just trying to help." "No," I said firmly. "You're trying to take control of my home and my life." "Mama," David started, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish, David. For years, I've watched you all treat me as if I'm incapable, as if my wishes don't matter. You see my house as an asset to be exploited, not as my home." "That's not fair," Michael protested weakly. "Isn't it? When was the last time any of you visited me without wanting something? When did you last ask about my interests, my needs?" They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Jessica stared down at her plate. "I've made a decision," I continued, "one that ensures my house will be respected and preserved the way it deserves." David's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" I took a sip of water, letting the moment stretch. "I've sold the house." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah's face drained of color. Michael's mouth fell open. David looked like I had slapped him. "That's not funny, Mama," he finally said. "It's not meant to be. I've sold the house to the Charleston Historical Society. The papers will be signed next Tuesday." "You can't do that," Sarah's voice rose sharply. "I can and I have. The house is mine to sell." "But what about Jessica's party?" Michael asked, as if that were the most important issue. "I suggest you find another venue." "This is insane." David slammed his hand on the table. "Why would you do this without talking to us first? Where will you live?" "I didn't consult you for the same reason you didn't consult me about using my house, because the decision was mine to make. As for where I'll live, I've purchased a lovely condo overlooking the harbor." "With what money?" Sarah demanded. "You live on a fixed income." I smiled slightly. "I've managed my finances better than you think, Sarah, and the house sold for $1.8 million. Their shocked expressions would have been comical if the situation weren't so painful. They had underestimated me so completely, assumed I was just a helpless old woman they could manipulate. "But that's our inheritance," David said, his voice hollow. "That house was meant to stay in the family." "No, David. That house was meant to be preserved and respected, and now it will be." I stood up, placing my napkin beside my untouched dinner plate. "I think I've lost my appetite. Please excuse me." As I walked out, I heard Jessica ask in a bewildered voice, "Does this mean we need a new venue?" I drove home with shaking hands but a steady heart. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself, refused to be bulldozed by my children's demands. The relief was overwhelming. My phone rang constantly for the rest of the evening. I turned it off and sat on my porch swing, looking up at the stars through the branches of my beloved oak tree. "We did it, Henry," I whispered. "We saved our house." The next 6 days were a storm of texts, calls, and even a few unexpected visits that I refused to answer. David left threatening voicemails about lawyers and elder rights. Sarah sent long, guilt-inducing emails about family loyalty. Michael texted that Jessica was crying nonstop about her ruined engagement party. None of it swayed me. On Monday, the day before the closing, I walked through each room of my house, saying goodbye. Not to the building itself, I would always carry these rooms in my heart, but to this chapter of my life. In the study, I ran my fingers over the leather-bound pharmaceutical texts I'd collected over my career at Red Pill. My colleagues had always been surprised that a lab technician would be so interested in the history of her field, but Henry had encouraged my intellectual curiosity. "Your mind is your greatest asset, Alma," he'd say. "Never let anyone tell you different." The doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole to see Mr. Abernathy standing on my porch, briefcase in hand. "Jim," I said, opening the door. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." "May I come in, Alma? There's been a development." My heart sank as I showed him to the parlor. They're contesting the sale, aren't they? No, nothing like that, he assured me, settling into a chair. Actually, the Historical Society has a proposal. They were so impressed with your restoration work that they want to offer you a position. A position? At my age? As a consultant. They want you to continue overseeing the house's maintenance and give occasional tours explaining your restoration process. You'd be compensated, of course. I sat back, stunned. They want me to stay involved with the house? Very much so. In fact, they're proposing naming it the Caldwell Historic Home in honor of your work. Tears pricked my eyes. I never expected recognition. I just wanted to preserve the history. And you have, magnificently. This way, you can ensure it continues. After Mr. Abernathy left, I called Eleanor with the news. I knew it, she crowed. You're not just some little old lady they can push around. You're Alma Caldwell, the woman who restored a piece of Charleston history. It doesn't change the fact that my own children tried to take advantage of me, I said, the joy of the moment tempered by this painful reality. No, it doesn't. But it proves they were wrong about you. Dead wrong. The next morning I dressed carefully for the closing. Another suit, this one a deep burgundy that Henry had always said brought out the warmth in my skin. I fastened a small cameo brooch at my throat, a piece that had belonged to my grandmother. Mr. Abernathy picked me up promptly at 10. "Ready for this?" he asked as we drove to his office. "More than ready," I assured him. The closing was straightforward. I signed where indicated, accepted a cashier's check for the sale amount minus the broker's fee, and just like that, my house belonged to the Charleston Historical Society. "Congratulations, Mrs. Caldwell," said the society's director, shaking my hand. "Your restoration work will be preserved for generations." That afternoon, as I was packing some of my personal items, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was David. Alone. "May I come in?" he asked stiffly. I stepped back, allowing him into the foyer. "The sale is complete, David. There's nothing to discuss." "I know," he said, looking around as if seeing the house for the first time. "I spoke with Mr. Abernathy this morning." I waited, arms crossed. "I came to apologize," he said finally. "We shouldn't have planned that party without asking you, and the retirement home suggestion, that was out of line." "Yes, it was." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "You're my mother. I should have respected your wishes." "And my autonomy," I added. "I'm not incapable just because I'm older, David. I know that. I've always known that. It's just—" He trailed off. "Just what?" "Dad always handled everything. The finances, the decisions. After he died, I guess I thought that I needed someone to handle things for me, that I couldn't manage on my own." He nodded, looking ashamed. "Your father never handled everything, David. We were partners. He respected my intelligence and my choices. That's something you and Sarah never understood." David was quiet for a long moment. "What will you do now?" "Live my life," I said simply. "My condo will be ready next week, and the Historical Society has asked me to stay involved with the house." "They have?" He looked surprised. "Yes, they value my knowledge and experience." Another silence, this one heavier. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said finally. "I really am." "I know," I said, not quite ready to forgive but acknowledging his apology. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have packing to do." After David left, I sat in my favorite chair by the window. The late afternoon sun streamed in, casting long shadows across the floor. In a week, this wouldn't be my home anymore, but it would always be my legacy. My phone rang. It was Eleanor. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Lighter," I said. "Like I've set down something heavy I've been carrying for years." "Freedom will do that for you." "Yes," I agreed, watching a mockingbird land on the oak tree outside my window. "Yes, it will." 1 month later, I stood in my new Harbor View condo, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the few pieces of furniture I'd brought from the house. The morning light sparkled on the water, casting dancing reflections on my ceiling. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "Jessica found a hotel ballroom for the party. No thanks to you." I didn't respond. I'd stopped engaging with their guilt trips and accusations. Mr. Abernathy had helped me set up clear boundaries. I would see them at major holidays, but otherwise, my time was my own. Another text came, through. This one from the Historical Society. "Tour group arriving at 2 p.m. Your presence requested if convenient." I smiled and replied that I'd be there. These tours had become the unexpected joy of my new life. Twice a week, I guided visitors through my former home, explaining the restoration process, the historical significance of various features. The society paid me a consulting fee, but I would have done it for free just to see people appreciate what I'd created. At 1 o'clock, I changed into a simple dress and drove to the house. A small sign now hung beside the front door. "The Caldwell Historic Home, restored 2010-2025. Inside, the Society's regular tour guide, Marcus, greeted me warmly. "Today's group is from the University of South Carolina's architecture program," he told me. "They're specifically interested in your molding restoration techniques." "Happy to share what I know," I said, feeling a flutter of pride. As I waited for the students to arrive, I wandered through the rooms that had once been mine. The Society had maintained everything exactly as I'd left it, from the paint colors to the period fixtures, my work preserved intact. The tour went wonderfully. The students asked intelligent questions, took notes, and seemed genuinely fascinated by the painstaking research that had gone into each restoration decision. "Mrs. Caldwell?" one young woman asked toward the end. "What made you decide to sell the house to the Historical Society rather than keeping it in your family?" I considered my answer carefully. "Some things are bigger than family ownership," I said finally. "This house has stood for over 130 years. It will stand for 100 more. I wanted to ensure it would be respected and preserved, not just used." After the tour, as I was preparing to leave, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Mama," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk about money." "What about it?" I asked, stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind me. "Jessica's wedding. We always assumed we'd use the house to save on venue costs, but now we're looking at $30,000 for the country club. We thought, since you got so much for the house..." I closed my eyes briefly. "Michael, your daughter's wedding is not my financial responsibility. But you're her grandmother, and after what you did..." "What I did was protect my home from being exploited. That doesn't obligate me to fund a wedding." "So that's it? You're just going to hoard all that money for yourself?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm going to use it as I see fit. I've already established a scholarship for young women studying pharmaceutical sciences at Howard. The rest is for my retirement and eventual care needs." "Howard? But Jessica went to Spelman." "This isn't about Jessica. It's about creating opportunities for students who don't have family advantages." Michael hung up without saying goodbye. I wasn't surprised. My children had always seen me as a resource to be tapped, not as a person with my own dreams and priorities. Selling the house had been just the first step in reclaiming my autonomy. That evening, as I sat on my new balcony watching the sunset over the harbor, Eleanor called. "I saw the announcement about your scholarship in the alumni newsletter," she said. "The Alma and Henry Caldwell Fund for Excellence in Pharmaceutical Sciences. Henry would be so proud." "I think so too," I said, smiling at the thought. "It feels good to create something lasting." "You've always been good at that. Look at what you did with that house." We chatted for a while longer before hanging up. As darkness fell, I thought about the journey of the past months. I had lost some things. The illusion of a supportive family, a house I had poured my heart into. But I had gained something precious, the knowledge that I was strong enough to stand alone, to make difficult choices, to prioritize what truly mattered to me. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Dad's birthday next week. Dinner at our house?" Henry would have been 72. We'd always celebrated his birthday, even after his death. I texted back, "I'll bring the pecan pie." Some traditions were worth keeping, even as I forged a new path forward. I was Alma Caldwell, 68 years old, retired pharmaceutical lab technician, historic home restoration specialist, scholarship founder. I was no longer just someone's mother or widow. I was, finally and completely, myself. 6 months later, I stood before an audience at the Charleston Historical Society's annual fundraiser. They had asked me to give a short speech about my experience restoring the house, now one of their most popular tour sites. When I first saw that dilapidated Charleston single house 15 years ago, most people thought I was crazy to buy it. I began, looking out at the crowd of preservationists, donors, and history enthusiasts. My late husband, Henry, was the only one who understood. "Alma," he said, "that house has good bones, just like you." Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Restoration isn't just about returning something to its former glory, I continued. It's about honoring what came before while ensuring it has a future. Sometimes that means making difficult choices about what to preserve and what to let go. From the corner of my eye, I could see David and Sarah sitting stiffly in the back row. They had come, not out of interest in preservation, but because several of their social connections were major donors to the society. Our relationship remained strained but civil. In the end, I concluded, I realized that truly loving that house meant ensuring its protection beyond my lifetime. By entrusting it to the Charleston Historical Society, I guaranteed that future generations would be able to appreciate not just its beauty, but its historical significance. The applause was warm and genuine. Afterward, several people approached to ask questions or share their own restoration stories. I felt a deep satisfaction knowing I had found my community, people who valued the same things I did. As the evening wound down, I was surprised to see Jessica making her way toward me. She was alone, without her parents or fiancé. "Grandma," she said hesitantly, "your speech was really good." "Thank you, Jessica." I studied her face, noticing for the first time how much she resembled Henry around the eyes. "I wanted to say—" She paused, fidgeting with her engagement ring. "I'm sorry about how everything happened, with the party and all that." I waited, letting her find her words. "Mom and Dad never asked what you wanted. They just assumed. And I went along with it because I was excited about having this fancy venue." She looked down. "It wasn't right." "No," I agreed gently. "It wasn't." "The thing is," she continued, "I never really knew how much work you put into that house. Today was the first time I've heard you talk about it, about why it matters to you." I felt a small knot of emotion in my throat. No one ever asked. "I should have," she admitted. "We all should have." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. "Grandma, would you give me a tour sometime? A real one, where you explain everything you did? I'd like to understand." It was a small olive branch, but a sincere one. "I'd like that, Jessica. Very much." After Jessica rejoined her parents, Eleanor approached, champagne flute in hand. "Look at you," she said with a grin. "Guest of honor, giving speeches, a regular celebrity." I laughed. "Hardly. Just an old woman who refused to be pushed around." "Nothing just about that," Eleanor countered. "Do you regret it? Selling the house?" I considered the question seriously. "No," I said finally. "I miss it sometimes, but seeing it protected, appreciated for what it is rather than what it could be used for, that's worth more than ownership." Later that night, back in my condo, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the lights of boats moving across the harbor. My life had taken an unexpected turn in my late 60s. proving that it's never too late to reclaim your power, to insist on respect. My phone chimed with an email notification. It was from the Historical Society. Preservation Award nomination, Alma Caldwell for excellence in historical restoration. I smiled, thinking of how far I'd come from that day when I overheard Sarah's callous words about my house, how my anger had transformed into determination, then into a new purpose. The house had never been just walls and floors to me. It had been a testament to what I valued: history, craftsmanship, the patient work of creating something lasting. By refusing to let my family treat it as a mere backdrop for their social ambitions, I had honored not just the house, but myself. I picked up my phone and opened my photo gallery, scrolling to a picture taken the day Henry and I had purchased the house. We stood on the sagging porch, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with possibility. "We did good, Henry," I whispered to the night air. "We did good." In the distance, church bells chimed midnight. A new day beginning, just like my life had begun anew at 68, when I finally became the guardian not just of a historic house, but of my own worth. 1 year after selling my house, I sat in my Harbor View condo reviewing the quarterly report from the scholarship fund I'd established. 5 young women at Howard University were pursuing their education in pharmaceutical sciences because of the money I'd set aside. Their thank you letters were pinned to my refrigerator, tangible reminders that my decision had created ripples of opportunity beyond myself. My phone rang. It was Jessica. "Grandma, are you busy this weekend?" "Not particularly. What's on your mind?" "Chris and I are looking at houses, and I was wondering, would you come with us to look at this one in particular?" I was surprised. After our conversation at the Historical Society event, Jessica and I had tentatively rebuilt a relationship independent of her parents. We'd had lunch a few times, and I'd given her that tour of my former house. But this was different. "You want my opinion on a house?" "Yes." She hesitated. "It's an older one. Needs some work. But after learning about what you did, I thought maybe it could be something special, if we did it right." My heart warmed unexpectedly. "I'd be happy to, Jessica." That Saturday, I met Jessica and Christopher outside a small Victorian cottage in a transitional neighborhood. The house was clearly neglected: peeling paint, sagging porch, overgrown yard, but I could see good bones beneath the decay, just like my house had once had. "It's within our budget because of the condition," Jessica explained as we walked up the cracked sidewalk. "Everyone else wants those new builds in the suburbs, but I kept thinking about what you said about history and craftsmanship." The real estate agent let us in, and I followed the young couple through rooms with high ceilings, original moldings, and beautiful, if scratched and stained, hardwood floors. "What do you think, Mrs. Caldwell?" Christopher asked. He was a quiet, thoughtful young man who seemed to genuinely respect Jessica's opinions. I ran my hand along the banister, feeling the quality of the wood beneath years of neglect. "It has potential, significant potential." "Could you help us?" Jessica asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "Not to do the work. We know that's our responsibility. But to guide us? To help us do it right?" I looked at my granddaughter, seeing for the first time a reflection of myself, not in her features, but in her newfound appreciation for preservation. "I'd be honored," I said. Over the next 6 months, I became a regular fixture at Jessica and Christopher's renovation project. I connected them with the craftspeople who had worked on my house, advised them on historically appropriate materials, and taught them how to research the home's original features. One Saturday, as Jessica and I carefully stripped decades of paint from an original door frame, she asked, "Why didn't you ever tell us about your work, about how much the house meant to you?" I paused, considering the question. No one seemed interested. Your father and Uncle Michael saw the house as an asset, not a labor of love. "Dad still doesn't get it," she admitted. "He thinks we're wasting money on old stuff when we could buy new." "Some people never understand the value of history," I said. "What matters is that you do." To my surprise, Jessica's renovation project began healing some of the family rifts. Michael came by occasionally to help Christopher with the heavy lifting. Even David stopped in once, though he made it clear he still thought they were making a mistake. Sarah remained distant, the only one who seemed unable to forgive me for thwarting their plans. At family gatherings, she was coldly polite, nothing more. One evening, as I was leaving Jessica's house after a day of work, I found Sarah waiting beside my car. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "All right." I unlocked my car but didn't get in. "What about?" "You've turned my daughter against me." I sighed. "Jessica is 26 years old, Sarah. She makes her own decisions." "She never cared about old houses or history before you started filling her head with your preservation nonsense." Sarah crossed her arms. "Now she's buying a money pit instead of a suitable home, and she's spending all her time with you instead of planning her wedding. Have you considered that Jessica might genuinely be interested in restoration, that she might find value in preserving something beautiful?" "She's trying to win your approval," Sarah insisted, "to get access to your money since you've made it clear you won't help with the wedding." The accusation stung. "Is that what you think of your own daughter? That she's only capable of selfish manipulation?" Sarah faltered slightly. "Jessica is discovering something meaningful to her," I continued more gently, "something that gives her satisfaction beyond social standing or appearances. Maybe instead of questioning her motives, you should try to understand her passion. Like we should have understood yours." Sarah's voice was bitter. "Yes," I said simply. "Like that." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "David and I are getting divorced," she finally said. "The news took me by surprise." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? You never liked me." "That's not true. I just didn't like how you treated me or my home." She looked away. "The business is struggling. David's been difficult since you sold the house, like something broke in him." I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for my son's pain, guilt that my actions might have contributed to it, but also the certainty that I had made the right choice for myself. I never wanted to hurt anyone, Sarah. I just needed to protect something important to me. She nodded stiffly. "Jessica wants me to help with some of the decorating decisions for her house. I don't understand all this historical accuracy stuff, but..." "It would mean a lot to her if you tried," I said, "and I'm happy to step back if that would make it easier." "No," Sarah said, surprising me. "She wants both of us. God knows why." I smiled slightly. "Because she's wiser than all of us." After Sarah left, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about the unexpected turns life takes. I had sold my house to protect it from my family's disregard, never imagining that my action would eventually lead to a granddaughter discovering a shared passion or to tentative steps toward reconciliation. That night, I called Eleanor. "Sarah and David are getting divorced," I told her. "Can't say I'm surprised," Eleanor replied. "Those two were always more about status than substance." She blames me in a way, says something broke in David when I sold the house. "That's ridiculous," Eleanor said firmly. "You didn't break anything. You just stopped enabling their entitled behavior." "Maybe," I said, "but I can't help wondering if I could have handled things differently." "Alma Caldwell, you listened to me. You spent decades putting everyone else first. The one time you stood up for yourself, they couldn't handle it. That's on them, not you." I knew she was right, but the maternal instinct to protect my children, even from the consequences of their own actions, ran deep. "Jessica and Christopher's house is coming along beautifully," I said, changing the subject. "You should see the original ceiling medallion we uncovered in the dining room." "I want the full tour when it's done," Eleanor said. "And speaking of tours, did you hear back about that consultant position?" The Charleston Historical Society had approached me about expanding my role beyond just giving tours of my former house. They wanted me to help develop guidelines for other historical restorations in the city. "I start next month," I said. "Part-time, but it's meaningful work." Look at you, starting a new career at 69. After we hung up, I walked to my balcony and looked out at the harbor lights. The path I'd chosen hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been losses along with the gains. But for the first time in decades, I was living according to my own values, making choices that honored what mattered most to me. 2 years to the day after I sold my house, I received an invitation in the mail. Thick, cream-colored paper, elegant typography. The Charleston Historical Society cordially invites you to the dedication of the Alma Caldwell Resource Center for Historical Preservation. I called Mr. Abernathy immediately. "Jim, do you know anything about this?" "I may have been involved in the planning," he admitted, a smile in his voice. "They're converting the carriage house on your old property into a research center and workshop space. All those notes and samples you kept, all your restoration documentation, they want to make it available to other preservationists." "But why name it after me?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. "Alma, you've become something of an inspiration in preservation circles, a self-taught expert who restored a significant historic property, then ensured its protection for future generations. The Society wants to honor that legacy." I found myself blinking back tears. I never expected recognition. I just wanted to do right by the house. "Sometimes doing the right thing gets noticed," Jim said gently. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for the following month. As the date approached, I found myself growing nervous. Would my children attend? What would it feel like to be publicly celebrated for a decision that had caused such family conflict? Jessica called the week before the event. "We'll be there, Grandma. Chris and I wouldn't miss it." "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." She paused. "Dad says he's coming too." "He does?" David and I had slowly rebuilt a relationship over the past year, but it remained fragile. "He says he wants to support you, that he's been doing a lot of thinking." The day of the dedication dawned clear and warm, a perfect Charleston spring day. I dressed carefully in a sage green suit, fastening my grandmother's cameo at my throat. Eleanor picked me up, fussing over me like I was the belle of a debutante ball. "You look magnificent," she declared. "Every inch, the preservation expert." The carriage house behind my former home had been beautifully restored, transformed into a bright, welcoming space with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, work tables, and display cases, showing examples of historic building materials. A crowd had already gathered when we arrived. Society members, preservation enthusiasts, even a few reporters from local papers. Jessica and Christopher waved from near the front, and there, to my surprise, stood David, Michael, and even Sarah. "Mama," David stepped forward, kissing my cheek. "Congratulations." "Thank you for coming," I said, genuinely moved by his presence. The Society's director made a brief speech about the importance of preservation and my contribution to Charleston's architectural heritage. A plaque was unveiled beside the entrance. The Alma Caldwell Resource Center for Historical Preservation, honoring knowledge, craftsmanship, and vision. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the gathered faces. Friends, colleagues, family members who had once misunderstood my passion, but were here today nonetheless. "Preservation isn't just about buildings," I said. "It's about recognizing value where others might see only age or decay. It's about having the patience to uncover beauty that's been hidden by years of neglect." I glanced at David, whose eyes were fixed intently on me. Sometimes the hardest thing to preserve is your own sense of self, your own values and priorities when faced with pressure to conform to others' expectations. But that kind of preservation is just as important as saving these historic structures. After the ceremony, as people mingled and explored the new center, David approached me. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "A real one. Not like before." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I never understood what this house meant to you. I saw it as an asset, a possession. But watching you today, hearing how people talk about your work, I get it now. This wasn't just a hobby, it was your purpose. Yes, I said simply, it was. I'm sorry I tried to take that from you. Sorry I didn't respect what you'd created. I reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you, David. That means more than you know. Later, as Eleanor drove me home, she asked, "How does it feel to have your work recognized this way?" I thought about it. Validating, but also strange. I never did any of this for recognition. The best achievements rarely come from seeking acclaim, Eleanor observed. They come from doing what matters to you, regardless of what others think. That evening, I sat on my balcony as the sun set, reflecting on the journey of the past few years. From the moment I'd overheard Sarah's callous comment about using my house for Jessica's engagement party before I went senile, to today's dedication of a center bearing my name. It had been a path of difficult choices and unexpected outcomes. I had lost a house but preserved my dignity, strained family relationships but found a truer connection with my granddaughter, discovered at nearly 70 years old that life still held possibilities I'd never imagined. My phone chimed with a text from Jessica. "So proud of you today, Grandma. You showed me what it means to stand up for what matters. Love you." I smiled, typing back, "Love you, too. Your house is becoming a beautiful testament to your own values." As darkness fell over the harbor, I thought about the nature of preservation, how sometimes the most important things to protect aren't made of wood and plaster, but of principle and self-respect. How sometimes letting go of something you love can be the ultimate act of preservation. I had been the keeper of a house. Now I was the keeper of a legacy, one that would outlast the building itself. 5 years after selling my house, I celebrated my 74th birthday at Jessica and Christopher's fully restored Victorian cottage. Their home had become a showcase of thoughtful preservation, with each room telling the story of its past while serving their present needs. To Grandma, Jessica raised her glass, surrounded by family and friends. Who taught me that some things are worth saving, even when it would be easier to replace them? I looked around the table. David was there with his new wife, a kind librarian who shared his newfound interest in local history. Michael and his wife had come, their relationship with me, still somewhat distant but respectful. Sarah had moved to Atlanta after the divorce but sent a card. Eleanor sat beside me, still my steadfast friend. Mr. Abernathy had passed away the previous year, but his son had taken over his practice and continued to manage my affairs with the same integrity. "I have an announcement," Jessica said after the toast. "Chris and I are expecting." Cheers erupted around the table. David's eyes met mine across the celebration, a moment of connection in the shared joy of becoming grandparent and great-grandparent. Later, as Jessica showed me the room they planned to convert into a nursery, she said, "We're thinking of naming her Alma, if it's a girl. Would that be okay?" I felt a surge of emotion. I would be honored. "You changed everything for me, Grandma. Standing up to Dad and Mom the way you did, it showed me I could make my own choices, live by my own values." "That wasn't what I intended," I admitted. "I was just trying to protect my house." "You were protecting more than that," Jessica said wisely. "You were protecting your right to be respected, and watching you do that gave me permission to expect respect too." After the party, as Eleanor drove me home, she asked, "Happy birthday." "One of the best," I said truthfully. 5 years ago, I never would have imagined this. My family gathered around Jessica's table, celebrating together. "Life takes unexpected turns," Eleanor agreed, "especially when you start making choices based on self-respect rather than self-sacrifice." At home, I opened a small package that had arrived that morning from the Charleston Historical Society. Inside was a beautifully bound book titled The Caldwell Restoration, A Photographic Journey. It contained all the before and after photographs of my house, along with my notes on the restoration process, compiled into a resource for other preservationists. The inscription read, "To Alma Caldwell, who showed us that preservation is an act of both love and courage." I traced the words with my finger, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. From a newly widowed woman buying a dilapidated house that everyone thought would break her, to a recognized expert whose methods were now being taught to others. From a mother whose children took her for granted, to a grandmother who had inadvertently inspired a new generation to value history and craftsmanship. From someone who had been willing to sacrifice her own needs to keep the peace, to a woman who had found the strength to protect what mattered most to her, even at the cost of family harmony. The book represented more than just my work on the house. It represented a life reclaimed, a voice found, a legacy secured. I placed it carefully on my bookshelf and walked to the balcony. The harbor lights twinkled below, boats coming and going just as they had for centuries. I thought about how each generation leaves its mark, how the things we choose to preserve tell the world what we value. My phone chimed with a text from David. "Happy birthday, Mama. Today made me realize how lucky we are to still have you in our lives, despite everything. Thank you for not giving up on us." I smiled, typing back, "Family is like an old house. Sometimes it needs repair and renovation, but the foundation remains." As the night deepened around me, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had been the keeper of a house that was now safely preserved for future generations. I had become the keeper of my own dignity, refusing to be diminished or disregarded. And somehow, in standing firm for what I believed in, I had become the keeper of a legacy that extended beyond bricks and mortar, a legacy of courage, of self-respect, of knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I, Alma Caldwell, 74 years old, had discovered that the most important thing I had preserved wasn't a house at all.